Hi guys, as you see here, I'm going to talk about the ascending tracts. In my previous video, I showed you two important ascending tracts, including spinothalamic tract and dorsal column tract. Now I'm going to focus on the other ascending tract. It's called SpinoCerebellar tract. So SpinoCerebellar tract, as its name tells us, it starts at the spinal cord and goes up into the cerebellum. If you look at this image, at the top we have the brain. Within the brain you can see the thalamus. In the middle we have the brainstem. At the back of the brainstem you can see the cerebellum. And down here we have the spinal cord. So spinocerebellar tract, carrying the specific sensory information from our joints and muscles, it's called unconscious proprioceptive. Unconscious proprioceptive. So as you see here, conscious proprioceptive is carried by the dorsal column tract, whereas the unconscious proprioceptive is a specific sensory information. It is carried by the spinocerebellar tract. So what is the differences between these two, unconscious and conscious proprioceptive? When I say conscious, it means that our cortex is involved. You can see dorsal column tract ends up to the cortex. So cortex allows us to consciously get aware of our body posture in the air. So in the real world, if you close your eyes and ask yourself, where is my upper limb, where is my lower limb in the air, the posture of those limbs in the air, so you can consciously answer those questions. So it is called conscious proprioceptive. Whereas the unconscious proprioceptive, there is no cortex. It ends up the cerebellum. So instead of cortex, we have cerebellum, which is unconsciously regulates our balance, regulates our body posture in the air. So I'm speaking here, standing up, unconsciously my cerebellum taking my balance. So that's why it's called unconscious proprioceptive. So cerebellum unconsciously taking the balance and smoothing our movement, and it also makes the tension in our muscles. So this spinocerebellar tract is really, really important. So the first order neuron cell body is within the dorsal root ganglion. Imagine that this is the dorsal root ganglion, like dorsal column tract and spinal thalamic tract. The first order neuron cell body is within this dorsal root ganglion, and it's a unipolar. It means that we have one axon splits into peripheral and central branch. Peripheral branch carrying this sensory information from the muscles and joints into the spinal cord. When it's getting into the spinal cord, what will happen? So imagine that if you take a cross section here through the spinal cord, you can find like this. We have a butterfly shaped gray matter at the center, which is surrounded by white column. So when it's getting into the dorsal column, it synapses onto the second order neuron. So second order neuron is here, the cell body of the second order neuron. So what will happen for the axon of this second order neuron? There is no decussation. The axon lands here, the lateral column. Here is the lateral column, and it runs all the way up here, like this, and ends up to the cerebellum. What is the differences between this tract and these two previous tracts? There is no crossing, no decussation. This is the big differences. So clinically it's significant. It means that if this tract is damaged on the left side of the spinal cord, our left side, the same side, will lose this unconscious proprioceptive. Why? Because there is no decussation, there is no crossing. Whereas if you look at here, dorsal column tract decussate in the spinal, in the brainstem, and spinothalamic tract decussate here in the spinal cord. But SpinoCerebellar tract, there is no decussation. To be honest, there are two SpinoCerebellar tract. We have dorsal spinocerebellar, and we also have ventral spinocerebellar. So this is the dorsal spinocerebellar tract I showed you. What about the ventral? What is the differences between these two? They are carrying the same unconscious proprioceptive, but the big difference is that the ventral spinocerebellar tract, when it gets into the first order neuron, when it gets into the spinal cord, it synapses onto the second order neuron. Imagine that this is the second order neuron. So it crosses the spinal cord, and decussation will happen into the spinal cord, and it goes up. Imagine that it goes up, and when it's getting back to the cerebellum, again decussation will happen here to get into the same side cerebellum. So there are two decussations for the ventral. Zero decussation for the dorsal, two decussations for ventral. One of them happens here in the spinal cord. The other one happens at the level of the brainstem to get into the same side cerebellum. When there is no decussation for dorsal and two decussations for ventral, it means that both dorsal and ventral spinocerebellar tract coming from the, for example, from the right side of our body, getting into the right side of the cerebellum, same side. It means that if there is a damage on the right side of our spinal cord, or if there is a damage in our right hemisphere of the cerebellum, the same side of body lose this unconscious proprioceptive, this right side, because there is no decussation for dorsal and two decussations for ventral. And just keep in mind, these two lands here, the lateral column here, or ventrolateral column. This is the dorsal spinocerebellar. This is the ventral spinocerebellar. The second order neuron landing into the lateral column or ventrolateral column of the white matter. If you have any question, please put your questions into the comments and receive great feedback. Thank you.